Welcome everyone. This is the 8th webinar, or 7th webinar, sorry, that we're running with Power Platform Finance. So we started with a series on, well, Chris started with the first session on looking at hierarchies and dynamic row-level security with Power BI. Then we had some financial modeling and planning vendors come in. So we had Central BI first, so we had Actoris. Also, we had Central BI to show financial reporting, and then we had ValQ, then we had Power BI, and then we had Actoris. So those three all looking at kind of Power Platform, Power BI specifically, planning and modeling solutions. And then we've had some sessions last week. We had Rory looking at building an expenses solution in Power Platform, and today we've got Jesse looking at how to do financial forecasting scenarios using the full Power Platform. So if this is your first time joining, we're a kind of community for finance and IT professionals looking at how to leverage Power Platform. So Power BI, PowerApps, Power Automate, and also say like Dynamics and the wider platform, which is relevant to finance. So it's myself and Chris who's on the call, and Naveen. We've kind of we're the co-organizers for this. So Chris and I work together at Altius, and Naveen is just a friend from my network, and we're kind of been putting these together and running them fortnightly every Thursday at this time. And also, you know, hopefully we'll look to present some live events as well, some ones we get face-to-face back. We did some of those last year, but you know, since March this year, we've been running and doing these virtually. So on the website, powerplatformfinance.com, or you can go to these sites and go to them directly. So we've got some tips and tricks for working with finance data in Power BI. So this is something I presented at Dynamic Communities and also at London Business Analytics Group last week. So it's just showing some tips for, you know, using those income statements, and actually the same data set that Jesse will be using today, and building out an income statement. So looking at things like running in subtotals and doing the fixed format layouts for that you need for an income statement. And we've also got Rory's recording from the last session. It's actually a pre-recorded session, but I've added annotations with it as well for building the expenses solution using Power Platform. So this was a really good session if you haven't seen it before. So he was showing how to use the common data service. So this is the kind of database that can sit behind PowerApps and other things as well, and bringing that into Power BI. And you know, it's quite a comprehensive solution we built, you know, full data-driven solution in less than an hour. So really worth a watch if you haven't seen that. So also, if you could please give some feedback on this event. These feedback comments really help for us to shape. They help the presenters in knowing, you know, for their future sessions, and knowing what's resonating with the audience and what isn't. So it really do help. So if you go to tinyurl.com, PPF in capitals, and then feedback lowercase, you know, either just towards the end of the session, or, you know, leave it, go to it now, leave it open, and then just please return to it before the session finishes or before you leave your PC, and that would be much appreciated. And up next, we've got another one of our colleagues. So I work with Jesse, Chris and I work with Jesse at Altius, and then we've got another one of our colleagues, Sam, who's going to be presenting on building a commentary feedback solution using the Power Platform. So I've put this event live up now already. So if you go to powerplatformfinance.com, you should see that there is the next webinar, and that link should work to go to Eventbrite. If there's any issues, please let me know. But yeah, please sign up now for 2 weeks time and get that in the diary. So Jesse, over to you.
Cool, thanks Rishi. So I've got 2 people that have replied on that Teams questionnaire. So I posted the link again. It literally takes 20 seconds and it just helps me get an idea. So while I'm giving my intro, if a few more of you would be kind enough to just fill that in, that'd be really nice. I'm just going to share my screen now. So just to give, can you see my full screen or my, wait, I probably want to do it this way. Can you see my full screen now? Me?
Yeah, I can see
you
the
can?
screen, yeah.
Cool. You see my full screen, right? Yeah, so just to give a bit of background of who I am, what I do, some of my social media platforms up here. not going to read them out, but feel free to take them down if you'd like to connect with me. I am a Power Platform consultant at Altius. I work across Power BI, PowerApps, and Power Automate. So a lot of the solutions that I build for clients do touch on all three of those components. And today, what we're going to be looking at is how to use all three of those different components together to build a solution to do some forecasting. So I come out of that. First, I'm going to have a look at the questionnaire quickly. Oh, we've got a few more now. So I'm just going to swap this over here. So all I'm using here is Microsoft Forms. So for anyone that hasn't used it, it's really pretty simple to set up. You can build out questionnaires on here and then send them out. So we've got here that 3 people use Power BI, the people that have answered the quiz. We haven't got any experienced users on PowerApp, so that's okay. I'll be making sure to go through everything slowly. And everyone's done a little bit of Power Automate, so this should be quite a good one. And in terms of methods to build financial forecasts, we've got Excel, Power BI, internal company systems. I haven't heard of Essbase. I'm not actually sure what that is.
It's Hyperion. Jesse, are you sharing that screen as well?
Perhaps I'm not. Let's try again. I may have clicked on the browser itself. Can you see now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool.
Thanks.
So, okay, cool. So we've got PowerApps, more on PowerApps in terms of what you want to learn. Connecting SQL using on-premise gateway in VM. I won't be covering that in this particular talk, but I can see if there's some resources out there to help you.
Say that again, sorry.
Connecting SQL Server using on-premise gateway.
Okay. Yep.
Can you see it?
Yep. I can post some links to that in the chat if that will help.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thanks, Rishi. Okay. But the 2 other responses on there, more PowerApps, best practices. I'll be able to talk through that. Okay. So first, let's just have a look at what data we're going to be looking at, and this will help just get familiar with what I'm going to be talking through. So it's essentially a financial data set. I've got some of my data in SharePoint and also in a OneDrive. So I've used a combination of both. So we're just going to have a look at the actual data first. So we have an accounts file, which is basically a key, and this is important. So we have a list of accounts and we have a key. We also have our fact data, which is basically our financial data, which is some actuals, and that has amount within it, and that has an account key within it as well. Okay, so just to look at the actual Power BI relationships very quickly, we have our finance data, which I mentioned, so we're not going to be using all of these different tables. However, the ones we are concentrating on is that financial data one I mentioned, which has a relationship with dim accounts based on the account key, and we're going to be actually building our forecast out on that account name. Okay, so firstly, if we just start with a blank canvas here to begin with, I want to go into the blank one, in fact, which is this one. We do have something in Power BI, which is what if parameters. So that's the first bit I'm going to show how to build. So within Power BI, we have a built-in tool set. So if I, wrong button. If I insert a, oops, I've forgotten what it is. That's weird, why can't I see? It's in modeling. So we go to modeling and I type in a new parameter. What I'm essentially doing is I'm going to type in this parameter. I'm going to call it financial forecast. I'm going to make it a decimal number. And let's say I'm basically going to take my actuals for the year, and I'm just doing a very simple multiply on it, which could be anything from 0 up till, let's say, 2 times as much. And I want to go up in increments of 0.1, and I want my default to be 1. And I explain what this means once it comes in. And we're going to add that slicer to the page. Okay, so what this has actually done under the hood, you'll see here that it says financial forecast 2 there. It's actually created a table of values for us to use. So I've got my table of values here, which is from 0 up until 1.9. I'm going to switch this into a list. And now I've got this multiplier, which I'm going to apply on just one number. Okay, so just to start off with, if I put a very, put that back into a slicer. If I put a very simple bar chart on my canvas, I'm going to pull in a date dimension. So let's use month for our axes. And I'm going to pull in the actuals information. And there I have my actuals and how much this the actuals happened within this time period. Now what I want to do is when I click these values, I want that actuals value to change. So I'm basically first just starting off with a very simple multiplier just to kind of see how that would change. So what I do for that is I've got my actuals here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a measure. So we've got a new measure. And we'll call that financial forecast value. I'll take my actuals and multiply that by the forecast number 2, because it got called number 2 when I brought it in because I already had one. So whatever I pick here, essentially it will multiply.
Sorry, Jesse, could you just zoom into that? It's a bit hard to read.
Of course.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. So I've got the actuals and I'm multiplying it by the financial forecast value right there. And if I now hit enter, whoops, go back a step. This.
Yeah.
I've now
it's also
got
created a measure for you, right? Using selected value. So that's what it's doing. It's created a table, it's created a measure using selected value to pick up the value that's selected in the slicer, and then you can use that measure in a forecast measure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so now that I've got that measure actually multiplying those two values together, you can see that as I pick different values, that forecast will grow and shrink based on the values which I select within here. Okay, but this only covers one value, right? So if I wanted to do this per account, I'd have to build in a different what if parameter for each of my different accounts. Okay, and that's where PowerApps comes in. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk you through the actual solution first. We're going to look at the solution as well, and then we're going to actually look at how to build that. So that's where the solution is born from. So at the moment, we can only, if we wanted to do a financial forecast for each of the different accounts that we have, we're going to have to create a new what if parameter each time. So instead, what I'll show you is we have our Power BI report with the data connected. We're going to use PowerApps to actually submit that forecast to a SharePoint list. So I'm storing that the forecast values in a different place now. And then we'll use Power Automate and a connector to refresh a Power BI report automatically. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the solution first before we go into it. My value, so I have a SharePoint list here with my accounts. So I've got various accounts within my data set, and I've got a forecast predictor. Now, if I go to my Power BI report now, if I go to the income statement page, and on this page, I have my accounts. I have some commentary, I have some actuals, and I have a forecast. So I'm now going to show you how I can vary each of these different account names by using a PowerApp within my Power BI, which is embedded. If I click on this remodel accounts, a PowerApp will open, and these various different account labels, I'm going to go in and start remodeling them. So I'm going to say because of, let's say because of COVID, means less conferences, that the amount I'm spending on conferences for the next year has gone down. Okay. So not only am I adding a quantitative value on this, I'm also adding some context around it. Let's see what else we can add. So let's say entertainment, just going to put that up. Higher costs from suppliers, perhaps. Okay, and this can be as complex as you like it to be. Let's go furniture a little bit down as well. Bulk buy discounts or something like that. Okay, so we'll leave that there. And of course, we can edit all of these or just a few of them. I'm going to save this forecast. Just give it a few seconds to save. And as this is happening, what we now want our Power BI report to do is refresh by itself. By clicking that button, I've actually kicked off a flow, which we'll come on to, and that's essentially kicked off the refresh for that data set. So if I now look at the scheduled refresh and have a look at the refresh history, the refresh is still in progress. It shouldn't really take that long. It's quite a small report, so I'm surprised that's not done already. But once that's done, once we log back into our Power BI report, we'll see that our most up-to-date data is there, and real time, we can start modeling and seeing how that is to look. So let's see if it's made it. So not yet, so just go back to the refresh for a second. So you can see all the other refreshes in the past only took a minute or so, or 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So it's quite strange that it's not refreshing. Connection looks okay. Okay, we will come back to that. I'm not going to let that hold us back. So now what we'll do is we've kind of briefly looked at the SharePoint list. So to recap how that looks, in our SharePoint list we have a account. These are the really key columns in the SharePoint list. So the account type and the forecast prediction. So actually we can show that. So if I go back to the SharePoint list here. Oops, this one here. If we check our different values, we do have our SharePoint values. They have been saved here. So it says COVID means less than on conferences, higher costs from suppliers, and bulk buy discount. So it did make it there. So have a quick look at this again. That's really strange. Not sure what's happened there. Okay, so to keep going, we will now look at how to actually build that PowerApp, and I'm actually going to be building that PowerApp from scratch, and I will be talking through every step along the way. So first of all, before we do that, what we can do on any Power BI report, this PowerApps visual is available. You don't have to get it from the marketplace, it's always available just there. So if I click that, it's going to ask me to first pull in a few fields into the field well. And this basically ties a report and a Power BI to a PowerApp. So I can essentially pull in anything within my accounts data, for example, because those are fields that I have. So if I start pulling just even one account, oh, I haven't signed in. Okay, and now I've got an option. I can either choose an app or I can create an application. So I'm going to go ahead and click this create new application. And we're going to go to PowerApp Studio. It's going to ask me, am I okay to exit the browser? So I say yes. And now we're coming into PowerApps in a blank canvas. So while that's loading up, what I do need within my PowerApp, so first of all, it's created a bunch of stuff to begin with. I'm not too interested in that straight away, so I'm going to get rid of that. But I do need my data source, which is my SharePoint list. That's where I'm going to be storing my data. So first, within PowerApps, we have various options up here, as you would in most systems. But if I go to view data sources, I can now add a SharePoint data source. I click on that and click, I've actually got an existing connection that I can utilize. and then I want to find that list which I'm using. Go back to about here to find that list, and it's called JN finance list. I'm going to connect to that. Okay, and on this canvas here, before we start, we have this app on start function. And what that basically does is it basically calls in, gets your data ready, anything that you need ready before you come into the application. So for the purpose of this application, the first thing I did is I kept this bit quite manual, but I've basically built a local collection of, local collection of the accounts. So all I did was I picked this list of Power BI, and I'm going to be using this to start building a gallery of items. So all this does is clear collect as a way of storing collections in memory. So this is only existing within the Power App when you open it. This isn't going to a database or to a SharePoint or anything like that. And I have my accounts list. It says I haven't got any available because I haven't run it yet. So if I run that on start, you'll now see I have a list of accounts. Okay, and that's going to come in use shortly. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do another collection right here. And here I'm collecting my finance list into a temporary collection. So the reason I'm doing that, I could speak to the data source directly, but there's something called delegation, which I'm not going to go into in huge amounts of detail. But essentially, delegation may not allow you to use certain formulas. So by storing it in a local collection, we get around those issues. So as a best practice, I always put all of my data into a local collection. One of the things to watch out for when you do stuff like that is, of course, keep your local collection up to date. If you write to the data source, keep your collection up to date as well. So now we can see our current data set, everything that we have within our collection. And the third step here is part of the logic that I've built in, which all I'm doing is I'm setting this variable. So within PowerApps, we not only have collections, but we have variables. So this one is called max ID. So if I reference max ID anywhere in the application, it's going to be the max of my temp col list, my local collection, and it's going to be the maximum index. Now, if we go back to the SharePoint, our index, and all I'm using this for is to make sure that whenever I reforecast, I always pick up my latest forecast. So this is the 11th forecast I've done within the SharePoint list, so I always have the most up to date. And that's just a logical step, really, in order to make this work. So now we're on our front page. We have our collections, we have our max, so we can start building out that Power App. So what I'll do is I'm going to put, one second, this up here. I'm going to put a gallery on the page. So there are various controls within PowerApps. You have a gallery, which is a way of looking at information. We could also use a form. You have edit forms and new forms. I'm not going to go into the detail of all of the various controls, but in this example, we're going to use a gallery. Okay, I'm going to rename this gallery to forecast gallery. So as a best practice as well, of course, you should rename everything on your screen. Otherwise, it will get confusing. I'm going to put a border around it because I quite like having it clear where that's beginning and ending. And now within the gallery, I'm going to connect this actually to my accounts list. So that's my connector. And now what I can do is insert values for each rows of my gallery. So the first label I will have is the account name. So if you remember the app that I showed earlier, we're going to forecast against each of these account names. So first I have the account name, and then my next bit, I'm just going to put in a label, and we're just going to call it forecast prediction. And the next thing I need is a drop down, which allows me to pick values. And I'm just gonna, so we'll be doing copy and paste throughout this, but talking through each step. So for a drop down, you need a list of items that you choose. And with PowerApps, you select them within these square brackets. This could be a database or a data source, etc. But for me, I'm just using a manual list here. So another thing is within PowerApps, whenever you want to view your data, you can hit play, and then that will basically let you see how that app would be for a user. And this looks okay for now, but I'm going to also make this a little bit neater with a title. So let's chuck a label in there and just call this forecast application. Center that a little bit, and the next thing I'll need eventually is my save button. So once I've entered all of this information, I want to save my forecast. Okay? I'm just going to make that a little bit neater. I'm going to pick maybe this color, change the writing. And what I also like to do to very quickly make an app that's pretty-ish is I just use some of these themes up here. So very quickly I can make quite a good looking application within a few minutes. So what we see on the screen right now is essentially, and I'm going to quickly do a few renamings, is the building blocks of everything that we need. Okay, but it's not actually doing anything in terms of talking to the data right now. So that's the next steps that we will do. Oh, and we have forgotten one thing. So we also have a commentary, if you remembered from the PowerApp. So if I just make that row a little bit bigger, I'm going to insert something to write the commentary in, which will be a text input. So chuck that there and call that commentary. Like this. So I've got my forecast prediction drop down, which is where I'm going to put my forecast in. I've got my commentary text, and you've got a default text there. Maybe I don't want it to say text input, so I can just get rid of that. There are various features that you can utilize within PowerApp. So one of the things I will do is I'll put a hint text in. And for my hint text, I'm going to say, please provide commentary. We've just gone straight to PowerApps. Actually, something just came to my mind that is worth mentioning. This is a Canvas application. So we have model-driven applications as well, which are based on the CDS and can be a little bit more restrictive in terms of what you can put on the screen. But with a canvas, you can put anything pretty much on the screen. Okay, so now let's start thinking about how we actually save the data into the database. So there's a series of steps. In total, I've broken this down into 7 steps in order to get that data there. There are much simpler ways of doing things depending on your data source. So I hope you're not put off by the number of steps here, but I have broken it down also to make it as easy to understand as possible as well. So the first step here, we're collecting our items from the gallery into a temporary collection. So I'm calling it temp col, and it's collecting all the items within forecast gallery. So another way to test within PowerApps is you can alt-click like this. So if I alt-click, you'll see, and I can always come back to my formula and have a look at how that's looking. So if I look at my temporary collection, I can see that it's collected in everything in my gallery. It says here that the data is unsupported for evaluation. All that means is that there's certain bits that PowerApps can show you straight away in this way of looking at what's been going on so far. However, drop downs and certain labels, they can't. It doesn't mean that they're not there, something I've learned. Because when I first started doing this, I figured it wasn't actually collecting anything. But when you start using it in the next steps, it will be fine. So that's step 1. Step 2 is actually one we've done before in this app already, which is to collect that maximum ID. So the reason I do that is because that maximum ID may have changed while you were filling this out. Perhaps there's someone else doing it. Perhaps someone's gone into the SharePoint themselves. So for that reason, I now put in the max ID, and we can run that again. And we can see what's happened. And we can see that our max ID is 11, which is what we expect from the SharePoint. So what I want to do when I start submitting my forecast is I want my ID to be 12. And that way my Power BI report is configured in such a way that it can pick up the latest ID. Okay. Another thing, and this is, I think, something I personally like to do, is I now think about what I want to send to my SharePoint list, right? And I like to do that by building this like temporary collection, which is not going to be used, but it helps me understand what's the shape of my data that I want to send. So I want to send a title and index, which is part of my SharePoint list, which will be the max ID +1. So just to relate that back to the list, those are these two numbers here. Now, title is a default field that gets created by SharePoint on creation. So I have left that there here. I want the entry date to be today, which is I'm using a formula here. So today lets us know exactly where we are, which is the 23rd of July. The account type, and the reason I've actually put in something there is because I want this collection to recognize that I'm going to give it a string, and I want it to expect a string when I start building up that collection to send. The forecast prediction is a number, which is why I put in 0, and the commentary, which is also a string. So you've got a string right there. And the next thing I'll do is I'm going to start putting into my, and we'll, yeah, I've hit play on that, is I'm actually going to start putting in the values from my gallery into my temporary collection. Now I see a lot of red around here, and that's because I haven't renamed my account name in here. So my account name is board label 1. Rename that. And was there anything else? Nope, that was it. So this is using a ForAll formula. And what ForAll does is it basically loops through all the rows within your data. So for all the values within temp col, I'm going to be patching. Patching is a way of saving either to a database or a local collection. So in my case, I am storing and patching, attaching data to this temp table, which I made. Now the patch syntax says, tell me where you want to put the data, tell me what you're updating, and tell me what you want to update it with. So the second bit of that, which says defaults temp table temp X, is a way of saying I don't have anything that I'm not updating a record. I want to add a new record, which is why I use this defaults. And thirdly, I'm picking up everything I need from this temp col that says tem col. Is that what we called it up here? Yeah, it is. Just a weird typo that I made. So I've called it tem col. So let's see what happens when we run that. And if anyone's confused, it will make more sense once I look at this collection. So table temp X now has all the accounts, has an entry date because I want to keep, this is the data that I'm going to be taking to my SharePoint list eventually. My forecast prediction, which right now is 1s, my index, which is 12s at the moment, and my title, which is 12s. Okay, so I'm just conscious that I'm speaking and I have no idea if anyone has any questions. So does anyone have any questions? Let me just check the chat window.
Can't see anything come through yet.
Okay, cool. If anyone has any questions, let me know. For the chat, I put that back on the other window now, so I'll keep an eye on it. Okay, I shall keep going. So if I now change this to a different value, so I put 0.4, 0.4, etc. I'm not talking to any data source at the moment, but if I now check my temporary collection, which I eventually want to patch to SharePoint, which is this one here, we can have a look at that 0.4, that 0.4, it's now getting ready to go. So my next step is actually quite a simple one, is I don't need that temporary, that item which we didn't require, which was an account type XX. So this is my method of just cleaning it up. So I'm doing this here where I'm collecting into another collection called temp2, and I'm removing, so I'm doing a remove if formula. So I'm removing from table temp X if the account type is called XX. So if we now run this one, we'll now see our data set all complete. It's now ready to be patched into our SharePoint. Okay, so the next bit is we're going to use another ForAll. This. And what this ForAll is doing is it's actually going to patch to our data source. So if we talk through what it's doing, so for all the items within temp2, so line by line, take each of the items from temp2, patch. So if you remember, the syntax for patch is source, record, and update. So source is where you want to attach your data. So the source for this is the finance list. We're using default again because we're not updating any records. Of course, we could be updating forecast instead, but I chose to do a new. And for all the different parts of information, take that from my temporary collection. So for the title, pick up the title. For the index, pick up the index. For the entry date, pick up the entry date. Pick up the commentary, pick up the forecast prediction, and pick up the account type. So you see, by actually building my collection very neatly to begin with, I know that I am sending the correct amounts, correct data sets to SharePoint. And once that's done, we can give it a test. So I can leave that as is, and we can just say testing, testing, and that will go off. So there's you can see these kind of dots flying across the top. That's an indicator for PowerApps that data is being saved and there are no errors on our screen. So if we now go to our SharePoint list, we can see 12 has appeared and we have our testing commentary. Okay, so that is part of the puzzle. We've now got a PowerApp that we can put in our Power BI report. And if I now actually come back to my Power BI report, it should pick it up automatically. Oh, I do need to save it. That would be helpful. So if I save and publish this, so I do need to give it a name. So I'm going to just call it 2307, which is today's date, because it helps me remember. So we're going to, not that save, this save here, and we'll save it. Give that a second. So one thing to note is that if you have a Power BI report that you're hosting for some of your users to access, and keep in mind this can be any kind of data. This is a financial forecast modeling scenario, but anything that you want to keep a record of that you want your users to maybe interact with, you would need to share the PowerApp as well as the Power BI report. So sharing access to one of those is not enough. You do need to share to both. So now if I go back into my Power BI report, my PowerApp has now appeared.
So Jesse, just before you do that, a couple of questions are probably very good to answer now. So with the PowerApp, there's a question of whether the data is cached or live.
So there's a combination. So anything that I put in a local collections, if I set clear collect, that's in a cache. So as soon as I close this or someone else logs in, they're going to get their own collection that they build. The actual SharePoint connector that I'm connecting to, that's of course live. It's not a cache data set. So now what we'll find actually is when we first came into the app, we stored the collection saw the SharePoint list in a collection. And now when we look at it, we see that we don't have up-to-date data because I haven't told PowerApps to refresh. I can, of course, and it's quite simple. So I just tell PowerApps, please refresh the list. And then once you've done that, please, I'm just copying and pasting here, so bear with me, is keep my cache up to date. Yeah.
And have you just built a one screen app?
Yes, this is a one screen application.
Okay, great. And are you able to also share the code or the exercise of the file? Is there like a zip file that you can?
Yeah, there is. So I've got, I will, if I can, maybe I'll do another window. I've got the words go completely out of my mind here. I will find it. I will send it. I'll put it in the window.
Yeah,
but yeah, there is a zip file with all of the files, the Power BI file, the PowerApp file, and all the code that I've used as well.
Sure. Yep, and we'll put it on Power Platform Finance as well.
Yeah, that's fine. Cool. So I will be sharing that later. Any other questions?
Nope, I think that's it for now, unless I've missed something.
Yeah. The word I was looking for was GitHub. It just completely went out my head. Yeah, no, well, I stored this all on GitHub. So I'll give you access to that at the end of the talk. I'll post it in the chat window. So yeah, like I said, we've now got our PowerApp here. So one of the features that this Power BI report did do, and in case you're wondering how that's working, is it wasn't actually on the canvas in Power BI when I got here. I clicked on this button, and within Power BI, to test that things are working, you control click. And the feature that I've utilized in order to do this is bookmarks. So just a quick look at how a bookmark works is within this button, I can set an action. I can set a bookmark, which is a view of the page as is. So my Power BI report is actually sitting on this page. And if I have a look at the various bookmarks that I have a couple here. One of the ones I have is close model and remodels. If I click on remodel, my PowerApp is visible. So it's always there. It's not that I'm going to a different page or making it appear. But if I click on close remodel, my PowerApp is not visible, which is how I'm bringing that onto the canvas. So we have now covered, just to do a very quick recap, look at the Power BI report. We've built that PowerApp from scratch, but what we haven't done at the moment is it doesn't refresh that data set. And that data set being this Power BI data set. So we're going to use Power Automate to actually refresh that data set. So I'm going to go on to Power Automate here. So for anyone that's not used Power Automate is a great tool for essentially doing like workflow automation or things where you want a button click to set off an action. And there are many connectors that you could pick from. And one of those is the integration with Power BI. So what I've done here, and I'll just go back, in case I did that a bit quickly, is I've come onto Power Automate, I've logged in and I've gone new, and I'm going to create a Power Automate from template. And my template is going to be a PowerApps button. Okay, so one of the tips I have straight away is that rename your button as soon as you come in. No tools are perfect, and PowerApps, if you rename it maybe after you've tried to attach it to the PowerApp, it gets a bit confused. So I rename it straight away. So I'm going to call this financial refresh, and I'm going to give it a date again just to keep track. And I'll save that. So that's done. Well, it needs a trigger. So let's click new step. And I have various actions that I can choose from here now. So I've got get a row, I've got email notifications, post. The world's your oyster when it comes to Power Automate and what you can do. As I mentioned, we're going to use Power BI refresh a data set. So by clicking a button in PowerApps, it's going to refresh my data set. So click on that. And it's great because the UI lets you just pick a workspace. It lets you pick a data set, which in this case is the finance PBI version 2. And we'll click save. So one of the really important things about actually getting this refresh to work is all of your files need to be hosted in the cloud of some sort. So if you had your files on your documents or something like that, of course, it wouldn't work. So if we have a look at our settings for the refresh within Power BI, we see that refresh. So it completed eventually after about 5 minutes, so we can have a look at that. If I go to my data source credential, you have SharePoint and I have a web, and I've entered in my credentials, so I don't need any gateways. So this page needs to refresh by itself first before you start looking at how to use the connector. So if I go back to...
There's a question on whether you're using Pro or Premium. It's using Pro here, right? You're not using Premium. Yeah,
yeah,
so
I'm not using
up to 8 times a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So fun fact about this, I think, and don't quote me on this, so I'm not 100%. You have a refresh limit of 8 times a day. However, by clicking this, I don't think it counts towards your 8 times.
I think it does. I think it's supposed to.
I think it's supposed to. I'm not sure that it does. So anyway, don't quote me on this.
Yeah, but with premium, it's definitely unlimited this way. So you can do 48 times a day through the UI, but if you're triggering refreshes through here, you can do it every minute or so, and it would still.
Exactly.
It's how you get real lifetime data without using direct query potentially.
Yeah, and I mean this is really useful as well. Just if you don't actually need your users at specific 8 times in the day to have their data, but rather they might want it when they want it, all you need to do is put this on an app, and then they can just go in and click it whenever they want.
Yeah.
Without having to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with all of this, think about how often your data source is really updated as well. I see a lot of Power BI reports with a refresh schedule far more frequent than the actual underlying data sources are refreshed, which is just a waste of resources and time.
Exactly. Okay, but let's come back to our Power App now, because we don't actually have that button in the Power App at all. So at the moment, that Power Automate is sitting somewhere. Our Power App has now attached itself to its Power BI report, so we're getting there, but now the Power Automate needs to attach itself after the save. So as soon as we hit the save button, the last step we want to do is actually call that connector and do the refresh. Okay, so what we do now, and this again is a bit of a tip. So in order to put a Power Automate attached to a Power App, what I first do is I just insert a button. And you could do this with something else, but I always use a button to begin with. And the reason you have to do that is you click on Power Automate, and now I can pick that flow that we just created, and that's financial refresh 2307. Now what's going to do is it's going to attach itself to that button. Now, if I didn't create this button, it would attach itself to whatever I had clicked. So may it be something where I already had formulas on. So for example, if I clicked, say, forecast, and I put my Power Automate on top, it's going to clear out all these formulas, and it's going to attach just this formula. So I've got a little red cross here, and that's because I just need to close the bracket in order for it to run. So if I now hit this button, so I can click play and hit this button, it would of course fire off a refresh. But I want this to happen after my save forecast, which is why I'm going to put this, and we'll give it a quick test anyway, just to make sure. So I'm alt clicking and delete that. If I come back into my flows here, another tip is whenever you do run a flow, obviously test it, have a look at it. So what we should have done really here is given it a test before we attached it. So I skipped that step because I know that this will work, but in general, do test before you move on to the next steps. Especially if you have multiple actions, you can actually test after each action, like I was doing, a similar kind of method to what I was doing in PowerApps with testing like my first bit and saying, does that work? Okay, it does. Let me move on to the next bit. So what we can do is if I go to my flows and financial refresh and then go to the run history, it says there are no runs. So perhaps I didn't click it, which is fine. We can, we can just click this again. Make sure that it runs. I'm just putting in some other values here because it's going to generate another forecast now when I click this button. So as that's running, we can refresh this. And it succeeded. So previously I must have just thought I clicked the button, but I clearly didn't, which is okay. And we can see that you clicked a button and that's caused a refresh to happen. And we can obviously confirm that in Power BI as well. So we go to the refresh history, and this time it took no time, so that's great. So it only took about 15 seconds there. And if we go back and have a look at our Power BI report, we will see that our latest forecast is here. So we saw our testing, which is basically just the kind of dummy values we put in here. We can compare our forecast, we can remodel, and we can start pretty much seeing live how this data is changing. One of the things to note here is as soon as you've kicked off a refresh, you do need to refresh the browser. Because my data is here as an import, you do need to refresh the browser in order to have a look at the data within there. So we've now done the last step there. So yeah, that's most of what I wanted to cover. Are there any more questions?
There's one on if you've got any experience reporting data from CDS or SharePoint with list records to filtering query. Not quite sure what the filter query aspect of that means. So maybe Mark, if you don't mind coming off mute and clarifying. You said he's struggling to find a good example with CDS or SharePoint list data.
So I'm not sure what you mean by a filter query either.
But I mean, I don't know, Mark, if you were in last session, fortnight ago, Rory showed using CDS with the expenses solution and brought that data from CDS straight into Power BI, and it looked quite good. And I think there's roadmaps to kind of make that direct queryable if it's not already. So then that will be something you can have a live connection to CDS with in Power BI.
Do you want to expand on what you mean by filter query?
Yeah, yes. In the like in the list records in the flow, there's an advanced setting called filter query, and I just saw some examples. We were trying to pull some data out of CDS and aggregate it basically, and report off that and email that out, and we were just without having to go through Power BI. And I'm just curious if you guys had saw any examples of that maybe. But listen, what you guys have done is awesome here. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. So I'm still not completely following what filter query means. Is that aggregating information? So you've got like some data sets and you want to aggregate it and then send it out using Power Automate?
Yeah, so if you've got a flat table and you want to aggregate by one field, one column, and then some field in that column to get a sort of a pivoted view of it, you can kind of do that in there. But there's some IDs that are related in there that we couldn't really figure out, and we really haven't found a good source to go by. So we were still kind of going through that. I was just curious if you guys had explored any other.
So we're using Power Automate to do that solely, or Power BI?
Power Automate by itself.
Because you could use, you could kind of combine it in PowerApps. So you could basically bring in the data there. It would need a manual click though. Someone would need to go in because you've got more abilities to shift data around and group data and that kind of thing. And then once it's ready, someone can just click send, and that will basically take that information to Power Automate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And also, Power BI that's what it's designed for, right? To do aggregates and group by. So bringing in the raw data from CDS and doing all of that in Power BI is probably a good way to go, right? Because that's what it's built for. They're engine by Power BI.
Yeah. I think I have a video actually on grouping within PowerApp, so if we just dig that out, I can put that in the chat window quickly. I'll just take, oh yeah, it's this one working. It's not working with the SQL connector, but it does work with data in general, so parts of that won't be relevant, but there are some bits in there when I'm grouping data and manipulating data within PowerApps, so that might be useful. Great, any other questions? Okay, thank you all for listening to me. I really appreciate it. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, there's only a few of us on this call. Feel free to come off mute and ask. Jesse, it's not every day you get someone with the experience of Jesse. Yeah, so any questions? We watch the recording, so yep, I'll do the editing this weekend. Let me know what you guys think as well of the editing. Like it does take a bit of time for me to go in and add those annotations and things like that. So let me know if you think it adds value to it. If not, it's fine. I can get the recordings out sooner and just put them up on on the website. But I'd be keen to hear any kind of feedback on that as well. I think it helps me understand it as I go through it. So I'm hoping it helps other people to kind of just keep that, get that connection with the written words and what's going on the screen. Brilliant.
I also
Yeah, Jesse, so were you saying something there?
Yeah, I did, and then my video started playing in the background. I've just put the video in the chat, which is basically a recording of like half of what I covered today, and the GitHub resources are in the comments. It's actually an unlisted video at the moment, so it's not actually live yet, but anyone that has this link will be able to click on it. So the GitHub resources have the Power BI file, the PowerApps file, which you can download, all the codes, all the slides, everything is on GitHub.
Yeah, and yeah, please do fill in the feedback form as well. As I say, that will help us. And there's also, we've started a bit of a community on Teams for Power Platform Finance, so we can create a new channel. There hasn't been a huge amount of chat on there yet, but we'll get that going. And we'll have stuff where you can ask questions, right? Because people always have questions on this stuff as you start doing it. It's always cool to watch a video and see what you can do, and then you try to apply it to your own data, and it's a lot harder. So when you do this, come to have your questions, feel free to join the community, join the Teams channel, and then we can answer questions there hopefully as well. And I'll make sure Jesse's added to that as well. Chris is on there. Yep, great. So thanks. Yep, thanks everyone for watching. So yeah, please do fill in the feedback form and sign up for the next event in 2 weeks' time, where Sam is also going to be showing how to do a commentary app on Power Platform Finance. So there are some similar elements to what's been shown today. So we are looking at using SharePoint list and PowerApps to be able to do data point specific commentary. So obviously in Power BI you can do comments against a report, but not really against data points specifically. And we've seen some vendor solutions to do that. So the next event is in 2 weeks. So we run them. So it'll be 6th of August. So we try and keep it consistent every fortnight, 6 o'clock BST. To do these events, so hopefully people can remember. And then next, you can sign up for the next event on powerplatformfinance.com. And yeah, do watch Rory's session from 2 weeks ago if you haven't seen it already. We've got some comments saying thank you for excellent presentation. I agree, it's really insightful, really good to see some of that. Great, thanks everyone. Yep, any questions, please reach out to us. And Shane, you watched Rory's session during lunch today. What did you think? Any comments?
Yeah, it was quite good. Some of it's still over my head though, so
yeah.
Still trying to get my head around it.
If you're new to to be honest, I haven't worked with PowerApps and Power Automate that much. I've done a little bit with clients, but not. It's difficult when you're not working with this stuff every day, right? To get a real appreciation for it, but. Give stuff a try, right? That's the best way to do it.
Definitely.
So CDS, try some of this stuff, build a commentary solution for what you're doing and show it off. That's the best way to learn. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Great to see everyone here. And yep, hopefully we'll be in touch again soon.